Why will Bitcoin likely not end central banks and government and state control? So in this video, I'm going to talk about what I think is a naive idea, the idea that digital currencies or private digital currencies will essentially end central bank and state and government control. Now, before doing that, go over to adamfayed.com, especially if you're an expert or a high net worth individual, and see how I can help you and indeed have helped people like you in the past. Now, I was answering a question on this today, and basically, I think this is one of the key mistakes people have made over the years with Bitcoin. What's interesting about Bitcoin is right now and for the last few years, it's true to say many people have used it as a speculation. Many people have also had wrong ideas about it, like saying, oh, it's a hedge against inflation when obviously it hasn't been, or it's a hedge against falling stock markets when it hasn't been. All Bitcoin has been in the last few years is a speculative asset that can go up and down, by quite a lot of money. But I think one of the more naive ideas, which was one of the original ideas of Bitcoin, but some people still have it, is that Bitcoin and Ethereum and our private digital currencies are essentially going to replace the US dollar and the euro and our fiat currencies and de facto kind of replace central banks and government control and state control. And one thing I have noticed is a lot of the people who are coming out with these ideas do tend to be quite young. And what's interesting about that is anyone who's listening to this who has any amount of experience, you don't have to be particularly old. You could be, probably in your mid 30s or slightly younger even, would have heard these kind of stories before. If you remember back to the 90s, late 90s, even early 2000s, a lot of people were saying that the internet was going to reduce the power of the state. Now, in the main, that's been proven to be incorrect. The internet and technology more generally has given governments more power over people's lives. They can spy more now. There's more opportunities now to look at what people are doing online. That doesn't mean that it's being completely false. It is true to say that there's so much information online now that it's harder to control people in certain specific ways. And likewise, in addition to that, because of things like VPNs, virtual private networks, and other things like that, that it isn't easy to completely block information now unless you're like North Korea, right? There's probably someone watching this in China, mainland China, and I know there's quite a few people in China who watch my content in terms of the percentage of the viewers on the channel. So I'm not saying it's proven absolutely wrong, but overall, it's given the state more opportunity to control the citizens. If you look at authoritarian governments around the world, they are very keen to use more technology for this reason. And this brings me on to digital currencies. You'll notice that China and some other authoritarian governments are very keen on the idea of central bank digital currencies, CBDC, and some democracies are too. Just a week or two ago, the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair came out with the idea that we should have identification cards in the UK. He had that idea about 20 years ago, and it's kind of partially linked to this idea that we're going through a fourth industrial revolution with central bank digital currencies, blah, blah, blah. And some people now are coming out with some outlandish conspiracy theories about this kind of thing, saying it's all a kind of giant plot. It's not a conspiracy or a giant plot, but the reality is, if digital currencies do succeed, far from being this kind of libertarian dream of, no state kind of control or something like that, more than likely the state itself is likely to take over this area. In other words, in another 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to have government-backed private currencies. They might try to induce people to give them away with higher interest rates than you can get on the private currencies. And in addition to that, obviously very authoritarian governments could even do what, some democracies did during COVID, like when Trudeau tried to, or the Trudeau government tried to say they would take away the bank accounts of the truckers. So this isn't a political video. It's more to say that when it comes to Bitcoin and private digital currencies, a lot of what's said online simply isn't true or isn't likely to be true. I very much doubt that when we look back in 30 or 40 or 50 years, we'll say, you know what, this was the point when the state lost control to private digital currencies. I think the only chance of that happening, and it's a very narrow chance, is if you have complete collapse of the currency and complete collapse of society, you do have the chance of having alternatives. I think it's unlikely to be Bitcoin though. And what's interesting about that is the old-fashioned routes, good old cash, is actually the easiest way to be anonymous in modern society. It's impossible to be completely anonymous, but let's face it, what do the mafia use, or many organized criminals? Yes, they do try to money launder and other things, but essentially they use cash. Likewise, why wasn't someone like Bin Laden catched for 10 years? He didn't use cash. He didn't use a mobile phone. He went off the grid. He was only found after they infiltrated his courier network. So the reality is, and the irony is, a lot of advocates of Bitcoin and digital currencies will say, "Oh, it stops the central banks printing loads of digital money, and it's a way of having more anonymity." But in reality, the ironic thing is, you will have more anonymity if you go back to the old-fashioned route of using cash. I'm not advocating that you should carry loads of cash around with you. I'm just saying it's a bit ironic, and I would not expect that Bitcoin will essentially take over from central banks.
Depends on every person's individual goals, how much money they want to invest, how long they want to invest. And I did not have at all the feeling from any bank with which I had contact with that they were interested in these things. Whereas with you, it was from the very beginning obvious to me that you had experience in these matters and also were interested in what I wanted to achieve.
Anyways, I'm very, very pleased and positive to say that I believe I've picked the right one. The results in the last couple of years have overreached my expectations by far. And I see no reason why it should not continue. Of course, I can highly recommend him as your financial advisor for now and for the future, because hesitating is missing out.
So I'm investing a lot in the Middle East market, but the amount of returns I'm getting from there is very low as per the amount of returns I'm getting from the investment portfolio which you made for me. Obviously, the best result in market right now is Adam.